Ladies and gentlemen, celebrating 5 years as a podcaster, introducing Nate the Great!
Hello, I am NateFNGreat, and welcome to another edition of the Game Changer podcast. Let's talk about horror movies, shall we? When you look at horror movies as a whole, they are created to give you that sense of fear and to give you something that's going to keep you on the edge of your seats because you're invested in the story, you're invested in the characters, you're kind of also invested in the happenings that are going on here. Honestly, guys, I've had the chance to cover a couple of horror movies, whether it was the video reviews that I did with Agent Cooper, when it was Midsummer, Child's Play, It, Chapter 1 and 2, or just kind of some of the things myself. And I've really gotten the chance to really enjoy a bit of the horror movie community. I mean, you look at YouTube channels like Dead Meat, where they have the kill count. It's one of those things where you kind of look and see these movies, and you kind of also appreciate kind of the commitment that they have going into this. Then you also talk to a lot of people who are big fans of the horror movies, such as, like I said, Agent Cooper, Carissa, aka Charisma, as well as Celeste, who recently we actually watched the reboot of Wrong Turn. Now, what exactly is Wrong Turn, you might be asking? Well, it's a interesting and kind of complicated deal. Wrong Turn started in 2003 with a movie that literally talked about these hillbilly-ish cannibals that hunted people down, and you guessed it, they ate them. Pretty simple and self-explanatory, but they also had these kind of unique characteristics about them, whether it was superior intelligence, brute strength, or just absolutely sadistic. It's just really interesting kind of seeing that first movie. And from there, this is where it gets complicated. They decided to make a sequel that was meant for the DVD, and the sequel is still honestly one of my favorite movies because of the fact that it's one of those movies that actually does a really good job when you think about it. It develops the characters, it reintroduces the characters that you knew a bit from the original Wrong Turn series. It also does give you characters that are just very well liked. You want to see them survive. The story is easy to follow, and it's just absolutely fun, to be honest. It's still maybe a little bit more action-filled than horror-themed, but you still are on the edge of your seats, just getting a thrill out of it. Then came the third movie, in which we see cannibal versus criminals. Let me repeat that. Cannibal, one, versus criminals, many. And it was very boring, very stupid, just nothing really good about it. Then it got even deeper because they decided to give the cannibals, the first three from the first movie, a backstory. Like they really needed it. And this is where we got a little bit more introduced to the interesting side of what Wrong Turn would be. Because if you remember, when Saw came out, it was definitely one of those horror movies that really questioned who was, the serial killer behind this? Why was he doing this? All of these crazy things. In the first couple movies, it did a good job of it. It also provided a reason as to why the serial killer was doing these things that he was doing. And then as time went on, it turned into gore porn, to say the least, because of the fact that they had all those traps and there was a lot of blood and guts involved. Just definitely one of the things. Wrong Turn took that same exact turn, but instead of just being gore porn and torture porn, they just decided to throw actual porn in there just for kicks and giggles. Yeah, that's essentially what you got from 4, 5, and 6. And also the fact that there were very little to no characters that were likable. You just wanted to see what would happen to them and what these cannibals were going to do, and then you just wanted to see everybody basically die, which in a sense every single one of those had that. So going into that and coming into the Wrong Turn reboot that was released earlier this year, I had a bit of an interesting expectation to it. But at the same time, it's a reboot, so I thought, okay, maybe there's something new that they'll put into this. So overall, what did I think of this movie? Well, let's kind of dive into it a little bit. I'll talk about some of the things that I liked about it and then also the things I didn't like about it. The story itself, it's pretty easy to follow. You have these hikers that go missing, and one of the hikers' parents decides to find them. They kind of do a little bit of back tracing, try to figure out what's going on, who is possibly behind this. And honestly, this is one of the first few movies that you don't exactly see any of the cannibals. And by don't exactly see, I mean you really, really don't. The cannibalism deal is barely touched on that. It's not gone, but it's barely touched in this movie. It's more along the lines of a different culture has been created and they're kind of trying to better the world in their own way, essentially. So that was interesting to kind of go from inbred cannibals to a culture that sees that their way is better and that their way of purifying the world is by somewhat killing people, but also there's a point where one of them actually has his eyes gouged out and he's thrown into darkness forever. That was really creepy. Now that I've really given it some thought, and it's honestly something you never really see in a lot of horror movies. I'm pretty impressed by that, actually. The characters are pretty developed. There was at least, I want to say, 4 to maybe 5 characters that I really liked in this. And about 2 of them were in that group of 6 that got lost in the woods. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, they developed some of these characters really nicely. There was some that had potential, but they didn't get enough time, or they were already developed and unfortunately they just did not resonate well with me, where it was like, okay, yeah, that's somebody I would not mind seeing get killed off because of their greatness. But again, you have characters that are really well developed. And as far as the characters of the Foundation, are they pretty well developed? I would say so. You have the leader who basically makes sure that everybody's pulling their own weight, everybody's created equal, everybody is doing what they need to do in the system. It's just honestly one of those things where it feels a bit like it is a democracy, but it also feels like everybody's being listened to. It's not just one of those things where it's based off of one person. It's more based off of what's right, what they think is right, and what they think is wrong. Which, in all honesty, is kind of nice seeing that. Now, do I endorse the stuff they did? No, definitely not. But I will say that the traps that they had definitely were kind of interesting. You had a big log coming down. You had the spike ball that injured somebody. They had that squishing, gosh, they had that squishing spike ceiling that fell down. They even had like a pit of snakes there. It was really something to behold, because the reason why they had those traps in the first place was because of the fact that they were hunters, and this is how they capture their food. But since certain people were stepping in them, it definitely does make a bit more of a difference, doesn't it? Now, obviously, the question now, going into the movie more, I really enjoyed, like I said, about a few of these characters. There was like a minor character in the group who definitely showed that she cared about the group, that she was a nursing student, so whenever there was injuries, she was able to help people out, which I thought was very nice to see. The main girl, Jen, is by far one of the more smart individuals of this entire movie, and because of the fact that she's not looking out for for all of her friends and everybody, but she's also trying to look out for herself too, which is to be understandable. There does come a point where she basically does not care about the relationship that she's in, and she's basically trying to look out for what's going to keep her safe, what's going to get her reunited with her family. And I will say this, that there's literally a scene where she has this powerful speech where she just says, this guy can help because of his knowledge that he has in the past. And she literally says to herself, I'm young, I'm healthy, I can create babies. That's literally how she got out of it. And it's smart. It's one of those things where it's like she's literally giving herself just so that she can keep not only herself safe, but I think she also kept her boyfriend safe as well. Obviously, in the end, they do not end up together. But it is one of those things where she's playing it smart, which I admire. Is it one of those things that people are going to, fully agree with? No, definitely not. But she's at least trying to stay alive, and she's being smart about it. She's not trying to, play up to them and try to, kiss their ass and stuff like that. No, she's pointing out facts, and that's what helps her and keeps her as a pretty strong character. There even comes a point where you think that she's brainwashed in this entire deal, but she's not. She plays it off very well. She's obviously let one part of her mind be brainwashed, quote unquote, and the other half of her mind is still holding out for that hope that somebody's going to save her, somebody's going to take her home. That turned out to be her dad, which is another character that I really enjoyed. He definitely was doing everything that he could to find his daughter, to find her and bring her home, which is Parent of the Year material in my opinion. There was another guy involved in there. He was like I think it was like a cousin or nephew of the, I think it was like a librarian or historian of the town in Virginia that they were at. And he was just kind of more like the comedic effect for me. He was just kind of one of those guys who's like, oh, I've been hunting, animals for a long time, and I've been looking forward to hunting these people and blah, blah, blah. That kind of deal. Problem was he didn't last for more than a blink of an eye. That sucked. There were quite a few things that I liked about this movie. Now, what are some of the things that make this movie tough? The time is one. It was about 2 hours long. There was so much fat that they could have trimmed from that. There were so many things that they could have just left out, and it would have been fine. I think that having some of the classic jump scare tropes definitely slowed it down a little bit. There was this two ending sequence at the end of this movie, which made no sense whatsoever and did not help the runtime at all. I think that some of the times there were just scenes that just dragged, like I said. I think there's some parts at the beginning that kind of dragged it. I think it took about maybe half an hour before we actually finally got to some, like, I wouldn't say violence, but got some action into the sequence. And, yeah, there were just maybe one or two characters that I could not give two bits about. I was just like, they're kind of just there. I'm trying to think if there was anything else that I did not enjoy about it. I would definitely say that the stepmom or the wife to the dad is not one of my favorite characters. She's just kind of there to be like, oh, well, you got two healthy boys. Who cares about your daughter and blah, blah, blah. It felt like a Cinderella deal, honestly. It was weird. It's like, why would you put this in a horror film? It makes no sense. I will say that I think that the quote-unquote leader probably could have been presented a little bit better at some points. But I do think some of the horror scenes were really good. The action scenes, such like that. Oh, geez. I forgot. Right at the beginning, when you see the group, they're all acting like quote-unquote hipsters. There's one point where Jen, the main character, is changing a tire. One of her friends just pokes her head out, does a selfie, and she's like, girl power. And it's like, no, just no. I don't know. I don't need that stuff. Not in these movies. Because A, nobody says that. B, you're doing one of the most annoying tropes of the entire deal. I'm supposed to like these characters, not want them to be dead already. And 3, I just do not like this in my movies. I know I said that once, but it twice as effective that you will not get me hooked on when you just decide to throw like, oh, hashtag blah, 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 hashtag girl power in like real life. It gets super annoying. It's really bad. Overall, I remember after watching the movie with Celeste, I just remember saying, oh, this movie, I kind of was like bummed out about some things, but as time went on and I kind of reflected about it, it's not a bad reboot. I just think that because of those small little details that I mentioned before, so the things that made the movie rough to get through, it could have been better. It could have. But overall, for a reboot, not half bad, actually. I did like the characters, like I was saying before. There were some that I was really enjoying the fact that they gave them enough character development so you would want to root for them to survive. I like the fact that there was enough character development to make you feel a bit passionate as well as have some kind of emotion about them. They were smart. The cult, known as the Foundation, were a very interesting group to kind of create for this movie. But to be honest, it's kind of one of those things that, looking back at it, it's not a bad idea to have some people just go back to the good old days where, they didn't have to worry about electricity. They didn't have to worry about guns. They didn't have to worry about all this kind of stuff. They're just literally, everybody's working together to create something more. And that's something that I thought was kind of cool. Overall, it wasn't bad. It was honestly a good movie. I would definitely say it's probably like my third favorite wrong turn movie out of these entire deals, because I would definitely put number 2 as my first favorite. The first one would be my second favorite, and then this one would be number 3. And then who cares about the rest? It just is a very interesting series that took a hard reboot, and they took a lot of risk with this reboot. But in all honesty, not a bad reboot. It really isn't. Now, I will say this. There is room to have a sequel because the Foundation is still in the mountains somewhere. And in all honesty, one of the characters that was in that hiking group, Jen's boyfriend, is still in the Foundation. So he could, in fact, take over. And there could be some motivation for him to go back for Jen, because the fact of the matter is that they were an item together. So it is kind of one of those things where maybe he's had that deal kind of brooding inside of his head and just thinking, if I could never have you, nobody should. Something like that. There is something there that they can make off of it. And this was just my idea for it. So overall, I give the movie 1 thumb up and a thumb going like kind of slanted. Not quite 2 thumbs up. But still a really good movie. Still a really good reboot. And you can definitely expect more reviews for horror movies like this in the near future. Celeste and I are planning on watching a movie once a month for the horror movie genre. So definitely can expect a horror movie review probably once every month if you get the chance. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for listening in. Be sure to check me out on Twitter as well as Instagram at RealFNGame. Be sure to also check out some of the great formats that we have this podcast on. Have great interviews, talk about movies and pop culture, such like that. Absolutely phenomenal content here, you guys. And be sure to give us a like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. There's plenty more things coming here. Guys, thank you so much for your support. For everybody here at the Game Changer Podcast, I have been NateFNGreat. Just reminding you to be safe, be smart, and remember, you can make a difference by being a game changer, one day at a time. Thank you guys so much. See you next time. Bye-bye.